Hello, and welcome to our Untitled presentation on the 2020 multi-strata quality measures. Today, we will summarize multi-strata measures and how they are scored. We'll also give you a few examples of some multi-strata measures. There are several MIPS measures and QCDR measures that require the collection of submission of data for multiple populations. This means that there can be multiple performance rates associated with a single measure. Accordingly, these are often referred to as multi-performance rate measures. Listed here are the MIPS measures that have multiple performance rates. There are also many QCDR measures with these multiple performance rates.
An overall performance rate may be determined in one of three ways. First of all, by calculating a weighted average, and this is the sum of the performance numerator values divided by the sum of the performance denominator values. The second is by calculating a simple average, and this is simply by summing the performance rates dividing by the number of required performance rates. And the third is by pointing to a specific stratum, populations in the measure, and using the associated performance rate of that specific population. We will now show an example of the three ways multi-strata measures are calculated. First, we'll look at measure 370, depression remission at 12 months, which is scored by a weighted average. The first denominator is for adolescent patients, and the second denominator is for adult patients. So both adolescent or adult patients who have a diagnosis of major depression or dyspnea with an initial PHQ-9 or PHQ-9M score greater than 9 during the index event. The numerator is the number of patients who achieve remission at 12 months, as demonstrated by 12-month positive or negative 60-day PHQ-9M score less than 5. So for the denominator 1, adolescent patients ages 12 and 17, or denominator 2, adult patients ages 18 and older. That's the two different criteria. When the measures are calculated using the weighted average, the different numerators are added together and divided by the sum of the denominators. So in our example, we have 20 patients in denominator 1, and we have 30 patients in denominator 2. We have 18 patients in numerator 1 and 24 in numerator 2. So you can see they have the performance rates, 90% for denominator numerator 1, and for the performance rate 2, 80%. So to use the weighted average calculation, we're going to add the numerators together, 18 and 24, divide by the sum of the denominator, 20 and 30, to get an overall performance rate of 84% for this weighted average.
Next, we'll look at measure 9, antidepressant medication management, which is calculated by a simple average. For this measure, the denominator is patients 18 years of age and older with a visit during the measurement period who were dispensed antidepressant medications in a time within 270 days prior to the measurement period through the first 90 days of the measurement period, and were diagnosed with major depression 60 days prior or 60 days after the dispensing event. For numerator 1 is patients who have received the antidepressant medication for at least 84 days of continuous treatment during the 114-day period following the prescription start date. And then for numerator 2, it's patients who have received the antidepressant medications for at least 180 days of continuous treatment during the 231-day period following the prescription start date. So you can see if a clinician submits the following with the denominator of 20 and 18 patients in numerator 1 and 15 patients in numerator 2, the performance rate for numerator 1 would be 90%, and the performance rate for numerator 2 would be 75%. When you're figuring with the simple average, you just take the two performance rates and divide them by 2. Or if you had 3 performance rates, you would take the 3 and divide them by 3. So in this example, we're taking 0.9 plus 0.75 and dividing by 2 to get an overall performance rate of 82.5%.
Okay, next we're going to look at measure 226, and this is preventive care and screening, tobacco use, screening and cessation intervention. And we chose this one because this is very common. It crosses, it's one of those cross-cutting measures, but it is a little more confusing. And this is one where the measure has 3 submission criteria. It's only scored on submission data for criteria 2, but even though it's only scored for on criteria 2, you must submit data for all 3 criteria if it's applicable to the patient. And this slide shows the first submission criteria 1. We're going to go through each one of these just because it is so common. And we've also included G codes here for what people are to report because it is, again, so common to submit on their Medicare Part B claims. So first of all, the denominator 1 is all patients ages 18 or older. And the numerator for submission criteria 1 are those patients who are screened for tobacco use at least 24 months. You can see that here are the 2 codes that you would use. Either if they were screened and they're a user, it would be G9902. If they're screened and they are not a user, it would be G9903. There's exceptions to this, and maybe you didn't screen for medical reasons, or maybe you forgot to screen at all. And you would want to report that. That is shown here, G9905. The reason being is that we need to have you meet at least 70% data completeness to be fully scored on a measure. So sometimes people think, oh, I forgot, I just won't report it. That's really what they want to avoid by having the data completeness be so high at 70%. They don't want cherry picking to occur. So we did include that there just to point that out. But before we go to the second submission criteria, you may think that if you report G9903 that you're done because they're a non-user, but that's not the case. And this is why it's really important to review these claims measure specification sheets because they will give you every specific criteria. Okay, we'll talk about submission criteria number 2. And this is for patients who are identified as a tobacco user and they receive cessation intervention. So here are the G codes if the performance was met, if it wasn't met, or if it wasn't provided for a medical reason. So in this case, an exception would be chosen. So for submission criteria number 2, if they are a tobacco user and they received cessation intervention in your office, then they would you would consider this performance met, and that's G9906. So you're going to bill not only the first one of G9902 that they were screened and they're a user, also G9906, and you're not done yet. So this shows if a performance wasn't met, you'd add in G9908 there as well. So, okay, we'll go to submission criteria number 3, and this is criteria. It's a combination of criteria 1 and 2, with the denominator being all patients ages 18 and over. The numerator is the patients who were either screened for tobacco use at least once within 24 months and who receive cessation if they are identified as a tobacco user. So this is where I think it gets a little bit confusing to people because you screened if they were a user or non-user for submission criteria number 1. Submission criteria number 2, if they were a user, you provide a cessation intervention. But then you also have to add in this submission criteria number 3, either user or non-user. So if they were a user and received the cessation intervention, you also have to add a third code, and that is 4004F. If they were a non-user, you have to add a second code. So remember how we added for submission criteria 1, I have a non-user, and you added that code. You also want to add 1036F. So that's where I think it gets a little confusing. And again, we have exceptions for the denominator if they weren't screened for medical reasons, or if you simply didn't meet it, then you would put the 4004F with a modifier of 8P. Again, confusing. That's why we're here to try and help you walk through this, but just to draw that one out for you. Now, as you can see here, that data was submitted for all 3 criteria, and the overall performance rate is actually going to be used for the specific stratum of criteria 2. So you still have to report everything, but they're just going to be looking at criteria 2. And the earlier data must be submitted as applicable for all 3 criteria in order to be scored on this measure. So let's look at our example. Denominator and numerator for patients in the submission criteria 1, we had 45 out of 50, so we scored 90%. For the submission criteria number 2, we had a numerator of 15 and a denominator of 20, so we had 20 users who were, 20 patients who were tobacco users, so we scored 75%. And for denominator 3, we had a numerator of 15 and a denominator of 50, so we scored 30%. Now, they're looking at, for this specific stratum, that the overall performance is equal to criteria number 2, so you're going to score 75% for this. And you must submit data for all criteria if applicable, and you will only, if you only submit criteria 2, you wouldn't receive a score, and I think that's what we want to highlight, that you want to pay attention to how many criteria you have to submit. You must submit them all, even if a specific stratum is used to calculate your score.
Thanks, Michelle, for going so in-depth on that last measure. That's a great job. Here we have listed some of the resources on the 2020 quality measures. When you look at those measure specifications, that's where you'll find the information on all the different stratas and which ones you need to report on and how they are scored. Thanks again for joining us for this presentation. Please contact Michelle or I with any questions you have about multi-strata measures or the MIPS program in general.